Right, hello and welcome to another Dauntless development video. This is another C# tutorial, following on from the last one, where we created this rudimentary calculator. Now, today we're going to be making some improvements, and we're going to have a little sneaky peek at something we're going to cover later, which is a while loop, and other loops we will cover later, but for now we're going to just look at the while loop. So, that's kind of what we're going to do today. So there's a few different things. One thing that has changed is that last little optimization I put in at the end. For this, I've just filled it in for the rest of them because it's pretty straightforward. So what we need to do is we need to have some way of starting the calculation again, because we don't want the window to just close every time, because that's just not really, it's not really that great that you've got to relaunch it every time you want to do a calculation. So what we can use is a while loop. So before we create the while loop, we're going to create a bool. Now a bool, as we've talked about before, is either true or false. It's just a true or false value. So that could be 1 or 0, true or false. It's on or off. So we'll just say bool is calculating. Calculating. We'll have that as set to true to start with. So we can say while is calculating, and then we can take all this code, just take all the code we've done and accept that little read key at the end, and we'll just paste it inside. So what this does is, as long as this boolean is true, it will keep doing this again and again. So what this will result in at the moment, if we run through it, is, if you give me one moment, there we go, just say A, and I'll say 2 and 3. 2 plus 3 equals 5, and then it'll ask immediately after. And we can keep saying A, and then say 4 and 5, and it'll keep doing it, and it'll keep going around, which is really useful. And we can close this off here if we wanted to close it. However, if we want to be able to close it without having to click the X, which generally with a program, it's useful to have an option to close it without having to press the red X, whether that be a keybind or some UI element. Obviously with the console we're not going to have a UI element, but we'll just have an option to continue or not. So what we'll say is calculating, and then just at the end, after we've done all the calculations, we can just say console.writeLine, do you wish to calculate something else? And then what you can do, I forgot to, one thing never forget to do, is put a semicolon at the end of the line. So do you wish to calculate something else? We can make a string, call it continue, I guess. Okay, we can't call it that. Continue string, we'll call it. And what you just saw there when it's highlighted in blue is that means it's a reserved name, so it's like a data type. Well, not a data type, but it's just a reserved name. So we can't name something continue, so we'll call it continue underscore string. String. So that will be equal to, and you can probably guess this because we've done it before, console.readLine. And then we can just say if continue string equals, and then we can do kind of all the options available. What we could do is we could just say yn, and then that kind of specifies that we're going to use y or n. But you could equally fill out all the possible options. So you could say if it's Y, if it's yes, if it's continue, and think of all the possible ways you could type it. But for now, we'll just have Y and N. So if it's Y, then we'll just carry on. So actually what we can do is we can just say if it's N. Actually, we'll start with that. If it's N, we can say that calculating equals false. Now what that'll do, and realistically, it doesn't matter what you type here, it'll carry on. So what we'll do here is we'll just say else if continue string is Y, in fact we'll just say if it does not equal Y, so it has to be either Y or N, and then we can just say if it's not N and it's also not Y, then what we can say is we can say console dot line dot write line, and we'll say invalid option, and we'll just say restarting anyway. Restarting program. And yeah, what we could do is we could also have a little loop in here that would check to make sure that it is right. But for now, what this will do is it'll just mean that if you type anything other than N, it'll just keep looping through and it'll keep asking for the calculation. If you do type N though, it will stop asking for calculations. So we'll say A, and we'll say 2 and 3 equals 5, and then we can say N, and then it closes. In fact, we're going to get rid of this read key because we don't need it anymore. So now it'll close straight away. And then if we type anything else, so we'll say A, 2, 3, and if we say like this, invalid option, restarting program, and it'll just ask you again. But equally, if you said 2, 3, if you said Y, it wouldn't give you it wouldn't tell you invalid option, it would just ask you again. So that's kind of how that works. So that's a loop. So what we're doing, just to kind of go over this again, is we're starting off with a loop, and we're creating a bool, and we're saying whilst it's true, we're going to do all the calculator stuff that we did before. And then down here once we've finished the calculation, we're just setting it to false if they decide they don't want to calculate anymore. Which means when it comes back up here, it'll say, oh, this is false, so it won't continue. Now, one thing to note is just in case you're not aware, is just to kind of clarify this. So with a while loop, what it'll do is it'll run everything between these two curly braces. So it'll run all the code, and once it hits the end, once it hits the curly brace that closes it, it will go back up to the top again, and it'll do this one check. And as long as this check is true, it will carry on. If this check is false, even if it's the first time, it will skip straight past that and go to the end. So this is why that's why we've got that. So that means we can keep using the calculator without having to relaunch the program every time. Now, what we can do, another thing that we can use the while loop for, is we can rearrange some of this a little bit. So you know how we've got this down here? We can change this, so we can say that basically we could use this to say if they picked an invalid option, ask them to pick a valid option again. And I'll not do that there because it's a little bit too much rearranging. It'll take a little bit too much time. But what we'll do is we'll do it down here, just because it's a quick way of showing the same thing. So what we're going to do is where we've got this invalid option, we can make another bool. We can just make a bool here, and we can just say valid. and then we'll set to true. And then we can say while not valid. Okay, so actually we'll set it to false to start with. So that means that basically what we're going to do is we're going to run this code. So we'll say if it's not valid, so it'll start off not valid, and it'll basically say if this is no, and it'll set it to false, and it'll say true. So valid equals true. And then because what we have here, this is so what we're doing here is we're saying if it's n, then it's definitely true. If it's not y, and it obviously wasn't n before, because that's how the if statement works in the if else, then it's not valid. And what we can do here is it will be valid because it'll be y, so we'll just say valid equals true. Oops, true. So instead of saying restarting program here, we'll just say invalid option, please type either y or n, just to kind of clarify what it is we're wanting. So what this should do is we can put a here, and we could say the number is 2 and the next number is 3, and do you want to calculate something else, and we can say y, and it will just loop back through just like it did before. We'll say a, and we'll just do 2 and 3 again, and we can say n, and it'll close the program. However, so that's all working just as it did before. But now if we hit a, and we do 2 3, obviously you can use other numbers, I'm just doing this because it's quick and it's the same, so it's consistent. But if we typed, say, this, invalid option, please type either. Now, I clearly made a mistake there. It's typing it forever. So let's just have a look through and see what I did wrong. I see. So it's setting it to false. And that's the problem. Okay, yes. So what I did was I didn't wait for another input. We put the input before that. So one thing that's very important is we need to check for a new input every time. So this, do you wish to calculate something else? That can stay there. But this string where we decide that needs to go inside here. So we put this in the while loop here. So that's why that happened. So there we go. So now I'll hit A, 2, 3, and we can say this, and it says invalid option, please type either Y or N. So I'll say N, and it closes. And that's just goes to show everybody makes mistakes when they're programming, and it could be something simple. So that looked like it was printing it forever. It looked like it could be a big problem. It was just because we had this in the wrong place. So obviously this has to be part of the loop because it wasn't checking for a new input, so it wasn't allowing the user to type something else every time it looped back around. So now it does that, and now it all works. So there's a few more ways we could optimize this and make it better. Obviously, as I said, we could move this around so that we could check whether it's a valid option for multiplication or anything like that further up, but we've just done that now, and I imagine you would be able to figure that out for yourself. So yeah, that's all for today. We're probably not going to be working anything else anymore on the calculator, but probably what we'll look at next time is we'll be looking into while loops a bit more in depth, and other loops such as do while loops, for loops, and for each loops, and kind of some of their uses as well. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.